70% of Black Americans in this country don't have anything that talks about what they want to have happen, not just if they pass away, but if they get sick. And in this season of pandemics and car accidents and sicknesses,
Welcome to Soul Talk with Wara. I am your host, Wara Grant. Welcome to season 4 again of Soul Talk. It is a place where powerful, life-transforming topics and conversations are shared to help you build a truly soulful life. First of all, if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome. But please don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking on the subscribe button, and don't miss another show by clicking on the notification bell. Today I am so excited to have a wonderful, powerful attorney here with us. As you all can tell, I really just love a lot of people in the legal field, but Janelle, she is, when you hear her speak, you will know she's funny, she is super, super talented. Welcome to Soul Talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Janelle Williams has been a licensed attorney since 2004. She is committed to designing legacies and protecting the dreams of her clients with estate planning documents. She was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York by an extensive Trinidadian family. She is a graduate of Spelman College and Howard University College of Law. After suffering the greatest loss of her life when her maternal grandmother unexpectedly passed away in 2009, she personally experienced the crisis that arose when a loved one is on life support and family members disagree about the right decision to make. She learned that there were legal documents that could have made her grandmother's illness and eventual transition a much more peaceful experience for the people that loved her. Over 70% of Black American adults have no estate plan, and Janelle is committed to doing everything she can to reduce that number. She's also a mother, she's a sister, she's a wife, and she looks forward to being able to guide us through the estate planning process. Welcome again.
Thank you.
You know what I love about getting to know you through the iconic mastermind class is that, I never thought about estate planning. And sometimes, especially when you're my age and you're like, what do I have? Why do I need to have an estate plan? So hopefully at the end of this interview, we would become a little bit more educated and hopefully come work with you to get our estate plan in place, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I always like to start with something light. Want to hear, what was the last book you read?
Okay, so no one's reading books in this pandemic because we're homeschooling and we're working, but I do listen to books. Audible is my best friend. So I just most recently listened to The Professional Troublemaker by Lovey Ajayi-Jones, Nigeria in the House. I love that book. It really pushes you to get beyond your fear, to step out with the courage that you have everything you need inside of you. And I think we all need that message from time to time.
That's my next book to read. I just finished Get Good with Money.
I'm reading that now. Yes.
That book,
Tiffany Aliche.
I'm not reading. I'm listening.
Mm-hmm. I'm listening to Audible.
I'm almost done. And then the next book I bought right after that was Lovey's book.
Look at that. Good taste. We both have good taste.
I love it. I love it. So, can you tell us a little bit about, let's just start with what inspired you to go into to study law?
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn in the 80s when it was a lot of issues going on between the Black community and police. And a lot of my friends had public defenders and they were really not so great. And so initially I went to law school wanting to be a public defender, wanting to effect change. And I did that for 13 years. And as you read before, in 2009, I lost my grandmother. And in very akin to African communities, Caribbean communities are very much focused on the matriarchs of the family. She had 9 children. It was a very trying thing for me at the time, particularly when you kind of see the dissension, when the hospital is asking, what are you going to do? Are you going to take her off of life support? Does she want to live this way? How long are we going to prolong the process? It was really hard. Thinking about what she would want when she couldn't speak for herself. And someone in the hospital asked me, does she have an advanced medical health directive? Now, I went to law school for 3 years. I'd never heard that term. I have a whole bunch of lawyer friends. And so I remember asking around and realizing, no, she didn't have that, and trying to figure out, well, why would you get that? How do you get that? Talking to other attorneys about the process. And as I continued to live, I just realized so many of us didn't know enough about that process. I did some pro bono work, doing free wills for certain communities, and then people started asking me to do it for their mother or their cousin who wouldn't have qualified for the services. So when I decided to make a jump into having my own firm back in 2017, I decided to focus on estate planning because 70% of Black Americans in this country don't have anything that talks about what they want to have happen, not just if they pass away, but if they get sick. And in this season of pandemics and car accidents and sicknesses, it really is a gift to your family. And so that has continued my journey of wanting to help the same way that I helped in the criminal courtroom, people who felt voiceless and powerless. I look at this as giving a voice and power to people who are anticipating what's going to happen throughout their life. The likelihood of us getting ill is high, and the likelihood of us getting passing away is certain. And so we need to ensure. I'm just saying. So we need to, make plans for that. We plan for everything else.
Yeah, we plan for vacation, so why not? But it's just one of those things that nobody really wants to think about, end of life. And I think what you do, the work you do, is so critical because, I come from a place where nobody was really thinking about the end of life. And so what happens is you have family members, you have children coming out of the woodwork, and everybody trying to claim to someone. So having that work, that paperwork or that process in place, I think is critical. Not only are you mourning the loss of the individual, you don't want to start mourning, fighting over stuff. So I think this work is so important. So let's just get right into it. Tell us, for people like me, what is estate planning?
So it's essentially sitting down with someone and thinking about what type of decisions you want to be made for you if you cannot speak for yourself, right? Yeah. So we're planning what happens with everything we've worked so hard to earn, to buy, to possess. What happens to it if we're not around? So who's going to pay the bills if you're in the hospital? Does your spouse even know what the account number is, what the password is to a particular bank account? There may be money in your account, but we don't know how to pay the mortgage because that other person never did it. What happens if you are on life support? Under what circumstances do you want to be maintained? And I think these are conversations we need to have, not just because I want input into that, right? I don't want to live a particular way if it can be helped, but it's a gift to the people who love me. We don't want to make the decision for you, right? And so it's important to think about it yourself while you're healthy and vibrant, and then write that down. And of course, we're talking about what happens if you're not here. And so when you're thinking about minor children, for example, if there is another parent that's legal, the children will automatically go to that parent. But if there is no other legal parent, you weren't married or that person never stepped up to take advantage of being a parent for the child, your other partner has passed away, your marriage or your relationship is not recognized by law, or if you both pass away at the same time, your children can end up in foster care when we all know that auntie would take them in easily. But if you didn't put that in writing, the government has to make sure they've crossed T's and dotted I's, do a background check, make sure they're not some kind of serial murderer. So unless they know for a fact that you have done that and you have given permission for that child to go there, you can put your child in a position where they're in foster care unnecessarily. So we're talking about all of that. We're talking about, do you have life insurance policies? Make sure that the beneficiaries are correct. Look at your retirement accounts. We're looking at everything that you own, everyone that you love. Where do you want those things to go? Who do you want to take care of those people? And we do that by using legal documents.
That is so critical. So now, when I hear what you're saying, what is the difference between an estate plan and a will?
So a will is part of an estate plan. So typically the two things that we'll talk about in an estate plan are a will and a trust.
Ah, I see. Got it. So that's how it ties in together. So, who are those that need an estate plan? Like someone who's younger may think, I don't need one, maybe someone that's older, but with the way the pandemic happened last year, I think everybody needs, because when I was watching the news, I thought we were in Armageddon because people were just, like the New York situation. So can you just share with us, who really needs one?
So in my opinion, if you're over 14, you need an advanced medical health directive, right? The law in Georgia, so I'm licensed here in Georgia, the laws vary in different states, but it says that here at 14, you can make a decision as to what circumstances you want to be kept alive, right? And that can be really traumatic for a parent to know your son played baseball or your daughter was in ballet and they're saying there is huge brain damage. She'll probably never walk or talk again. You may think to yourself, well, I'm going to do whatever it takes, but you may be having a bedbound, unable to communicate child for the rest of your life. It is helpful for them to have input into that decision. So the law says from 14, they can write down that if 2 treating physicians agree that this is my longevity or this is the prognosis of the type of life I'm going to live, then under those circumstances, I'd like to be removed from life support. Now, obviously, if they're removed from life support and they continue to live, then that's God's grace. Yeah. But if they didn't, that was their choice. I certainly think that as an adult, if you own anything or if you have a child, you need an estate plan. And I think it's really unfortunate when people don't want to make the investment on the front end to ensure that their children go to the right people and that their home, their car, their jewelry, pieces of art, things that mean something to someone else go to the right person. Because eventually you'll end up paying an attorney after the fact to go into court. It's 5, 10, 20 times as expensive, takes 5, 10, 20 times as long. You will end up spending more money than the asset is even worth. And so I think if you're a person who has no family, no loved ones, you don't own anything, you still need to have that advanced medical health directive. I think that's helpful, and a power of attorney if there's a trusted friend. But maybe a will or trust is not necessary. But certainly if you own something and you want that something to go to a person that you care for and you want to leave directions for how that goes there, if you have a child, you need to have something.
That's so good. That's so important. So at the age of 14, it's okay to go ahead. So basically you can get, so is it going to be one document for each person, or you can have a holistic one for the entire family?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the will is for each individual person, but you can have a family trust, right? So there are clients that I work with where the husband and the wife have accumulated a number of assets. They now have adult children, grandchildren. They can, as a couple, create a family trust, and that can have like sub-trusts for the children, things that go to the grandchildren. So that may be a bit of a larger trust, but most people, you're going to be individually planning for what you want to happen to your life, because that loving husband today may not be the loving husband next week. And so we just need to make sure that we're noting what we each want independent of the other in case that person passes away or in case that relationship falters.
Oh, I love it. Understood. So, and that's, I love how, you talked about the difference between a will and trust. It's not the same thing, but it's done in the same process.
Correct.
Got it. So how are you able to use a will and a trust to take care of your children and grandchildren?
Okay. So a will comes into place if you've passed away, and essentially you name one person who's going to be in charge of giving out the stuff, right? That cuts down on a lot of controversy, a lot of conflict. We identify who's that responsible family member who we know can step in, get everything together, and make sure that it goes into the right hands. And you do that through the probate process. So you have to go to court, but if you have a will, it's a much more streamlined process. It's a lot less expensive, and you get to have family members come in. They look at the will. They can contest it, but they have the right to say, we want to see it. This is where mommy or daddy said things were supposed to go. We get that done. Whereas with a trust, you're talking more about something that never goes to court for the most part, that people don't necessarily get to see. There's some protections in there, from some confidentiality things in there. So a lot of my clients prefer a trust because they don't want all the family to see it, and they don't want it to go to court. That's the only way you can avoid probate, is with that trust. But the will is going to be per person and is going to say exactly what happens if you pass away. There's some other documents that we also discussed that happen if you're sick, but the will only comes into play if you're not here anymore.
So does that trust override the will?
So with a trust, we have what's called a pour over will. So all of my trust clients also have a will. It's just kind of bare bones because all of the meaty things are in the trust. And a trust can be active while you're alive, right? So you create that while you're alive, you put things in that trust, and it takes it out of your name. There's a lot of amazing things that happen when you get to take things you own out of your name. That means they're protected from a lot of lawsuits. They're protected from prying eyes. So my clients who are a bit well known in the Georgia area who don't want people to know that that property belongs to them, they'll put it in the War Grant Trust, even if their name is not that, right? So it's a way to protect what they have and how they want it to be handled. And then a trust allows you to give very specific instructions, right? So you can say things things like this can only go to that family member when they're 30, and they have to be married, and they have to have at least one child. They can't be on drugs. They can't have any mental health issues. There's a lot of nuances that you can put in a trust that are a little bit more difficult to oversee with a will. And with that trust, you can put things in, you can take things out. The entire time that you're alive, you have control over the trust. The biggest blessing is that when you're not here anymore, the trust just goes to the next trustee. So that person gets to oversee it. No court has to be involved, and no one has to know your business. Because with a will, it does get published with the courts. Yeah. So nosy people like the TMZs of the world who go down to court when famous people die, everyone gets access to that because it's public record. So when they have a trust, TMZ doesn't get it. So that's another benefit of the trust.
So but then if you're like me, TMZ's not looking for
you
me.
Never know. I've heard your albums, ma'am. They might be coming to look.
But it is important to put in place. So, in our culture, a lot of, even in the Nigerian culture, even Black people, nobody really wants to talk about death. It is such a difficult conversation, right? And I think one of the things that the pandemic has really taught me and a lot of us is that it can come anytime, anyhow. So how can we as a community begin to talk more about estate planning and make it a normal conversation?
I always say people don't like lawyers till they need lawyers, right?
Yeah.
We're never people's fave, right? But I think that there's a reason my business has tripled in the past year, is because I don't have to get out there and say, these are the things that can happen. It's happening. And so we're watching it happen to our cousin. We're watching it happen to our sister, God help us, our mother and father, and struggling through the process because they didn't have anything in writing. We have families who have people on ventilators for weeks and weeks and weeks. We don't know what's happening. The funds are being drawn down because of medical stuff. We know that the main reason for bankruptcy in this country is medical bills. And so the family is really challenged with, do we make a decision that's good for us long term and say we can't keep this up? Or do we bankrupt ourselves to keep her alive when this may not even be the way that she wants to live? And so as we get to observe that, we start thinking, how can I make sure it doesn't happen to my family? How do we start making plans to build generational wealth? And honestly, this is a tool for the Black community. I don't think that it is coincidental that we didn't have the rights to do wills and trusts back in the day. And a lot of people in the majority culture in this country had that opportunity. They could make sure that their son and their grandson had a foundation financially to build upon, right? They made sure that the property they had went into the right hands, and they left instructions for how those things would be done. When we don't do those things, that means that the home we worked hard to have can end up in the hands of investors, can end up being sold for pennies of the dollar, could end up just kind of disappearing because the deeds weren't correct or no one understood the probate process. And so the only way we can ensure that we continue the wealth that we're building onto the next generation is to make these kinds of plans.
I love that. Wow. So with George, the name of your business is Georgia Wills and Trust. So how are you helping? You mentioned that you're supporting your clients, but what are those things that you can do to help clients face some of these fears, right, that they're having?
Right. And so obviously, all of my business is referral based. I haven't started marketing in these several years, and that's been God's grace.
That's a good thing.
That's been God's grace.
You don't have to market.
Yes.
You are, what's the fancy car that they'd never market? I've never seen a Tesla ad on TV.
You're right.
So
yes, I'm in Tesla company.
You're a Tesla company.
I like that. Okay, I'm gonna start using that one. So yeah, my social media pages, I'm still working on those. I work a lot, so it's hard to really devote time to marketing. Yeah, and I'm hopeful that marketing will come, but I'm grateful that there's been enough referral business. And so what I say is talk to your friends. Whenever I'm done at a signing, because you have to get together, even in COVID, we've had to get together in person to do these signings. I'm like, tell your friends, right? Tell them what this process was like. And I have yet to have a client in the 4 years I've been out on my own who at the signing doesn't go, even if the questionnaire was challenging, even if the process was confusing, or I'm asking you questions like, I don't know what I don't, leave me alone, Miss Williams. When it's all said and done and I hand you that file folder, you're like, yes, I know now if something happens to me, my spouse knows exactly where to go, exactly what to do, which banks to call, how to get the life insurance policy, how to make sure we maintain the house, who to give the bikes to, who to give the cars to. It takes so much stress out of that person. So I think a large part of it is me encouraging people to talk to others. I speak at a number of churches. I've spoken at Ebenezer very recently. I try to get out the word in nonprofit spaces where it's not coming across like a sales technique. It is really me talking about the fact that we can't focus on leaving a legacy by putting the word into our children and by preaching to them about morals and values. And then when they pass away, when we pass away, all they have is debt.
All they have is debt.
There's nothing that we've put in place to ensure that even if we had debt, it didn't follow us, that they had directions about what you wanted to be done with the different things that you owned. And so it's so important for people to realize it's not about money per se, because honestly, I'll make a lot more money if you don't get me to do the estate planning and get you to hire me on the probate end, right? That's going to be much more efficient for me. But I really am committed in the same way that I was to criminal justice to empowerment of our communities. Now, I have white clients as well. I have Latino clients as well. I haven't had any Asian clients yet, but they're coming.
So we're speaking into
come on, somebody.
Diversity.
But I do feel like in the Black community, we're not talking about this, and we're hurting ourselves by continuing to kind of brush away the conversation. And yes, there are a lot of platforms. There's a lot of things that are happening right now that need to be at the forefront, but we can't let it go that the Aretha Franklins of the world and the Chadwick Bosemans, the Princes, there's so many of them who had money, had lawyers at their disposal and didn't do it. We can't keep that up, because we're losing wealth that can recycle in the communities, recycle in our cities, right? And so we need to start thinking that way when we think legacy, not just spiritual legacy, not just the legacy of love, and you felt all this love and compassion and grace from me, but here is some hard cash. Here's an asset that you can utilize so you can make different decisions than I had to make.
I think that's so important, because not only are you, building that legacy from what you're training your children and teaching them about, how to live a good life, but you're also already giving them that ladder. So the struggles that we had as young people, or, our parents had, the children don't have to go through that, because it's painful enough that you're not present, but then to have them to have to deal with, I don't know where my mom's bank account is. I think this process is so important. So, when I think about what you said, and a lot of times we have this mindset that anything that has to do with lawyers, attorneys, is expensive. So what does it cost? What are the kind of expectations that we can have?
So what I tell people is you're going to pay it on the front end, or your family's going to pay it on the back end, right? And so if you're doing an individual document, like I have a lot of people in the midst of the pandemic who've come to me and said, we need an advanced medical health directive. We don't need to do the will right now, but we need to figure out what happens to grandma if she gets sick, right? That is a $350 document. That's based on the amount of time it takes. For an estate plan to be done for a will, for example, we're talking about the will that comes into place when you pass away, that advanced medical health directive, which gives instructions as to what happens if you're not well. It also talks about, do you want to be buried, cremated, organ donation, all of those things are discussed in there. We're going to have a durable financial power of attorney. That allows someone to step into your business shoes, to handle things with your bank account, handle things with your business if you are not well. So we're not talking about if you pass away. If you pass away, the document is moot. But if you are alive, but you're just not able to talk for yourself, you're in some kind of coma, or you're incapacitated for a while, that person can then go where they need to go and, let's say, finish the closing on the house or finish the business deal that you were working on. We have a Hipaa release, which allows that particular person to see your medical records, because even though you have the advanced medical health directive, that means that you can talk to them about the choices that your loved one wanted, but the doctors don't have to show you their file. That's personal and confidential. So this lets you see, what are the doctors making the decision based on? What is the diagnosis?
You can get second opinions sometimes.
Exactly. Right? So very helpful. And then we go through all of your assets. We look at how you deeded your property, make sure your beneficiaries are correct. I had one last week. The ex-wife was still the beneficiary, and he had been married to the second wife for 22 years, right? Goodness. Sometimes we just don't have to check. And so this kind of pushes people to start thinking about what they have, that life insurance policy they forgot they had from 15 years ago. So all of that is discussed. That is a $1,500 package. If you want a trust, it depends on how complicated that trust is, but that starts at $3,000. If you wanted to probate your estate because your loved one passed away without a will, that retainer starts at $10,000. When you're talking about families with a number of different children, a number of different properties, that can go on for years, literally years. And so it can come into the tens of thousands of dollars. So I'm not shaking a leg at $1,500. That's a large sum of money. But what you're doing,
compared to what you pay at the end of the back.
Come on, somebody. And I always say to people, if you have a bag in your closet that costs more than $1,500, you should not be talking to me about you don't want to make this investment. We need to really start putting our money where our mouth is and prioritize this part of the legacy that we want to leave.
And I think this is something that is so important in the Black community and in
Every community, really.
Because, you know, we all need to start planning for our futures and building, especially minorities, right? Building generational wealth. Yes, there have been historical challenges, but now we are in a position, in a place where no more excuses, right? We can do it. And it starts with things like this.
Right.
Janelle, I wish we could keep talking forever and ever. You know, you're my go-to girl at any point in time, but thank you so much for sharing this knowledge. I have learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners, too, have learned a lot. I will be talking to you very soon.
Yes, ma'am.
About this estate planning.
Yes, ma'am.
So again, thank you so much for joining us on Soul Talk. Well, guys, there you have it. You know, Janelle has been able to share with us so much wisdom. But before we go, I want her to share with us how we can get in contact with you and, you know, basically get our estate planning process in place.
That sounds great. The website is www.georgia, spelled out Georgia, wills.
And we have it right at the bottom of the
They
screen.
read it on the bottom, willsandtrust.com. And so on there, you can schedule a consultation. For current clients, they're able to schedule all of your planning meetings, your signings. So that way it makes it a lot easier for you. And that all has all my contact information, phone numbers, etc. So go to georgiawillsandtrust.com.
Awesome. And we can follow you on social media?
Yes, we're working on that. But yes,
it.
at Georgia. There's some posts on there. I'm cute. It's at Georgia Wills and Trust, also the same on Facebook. Okay. And my hope is that as the pandemic kind of slows down and these kids go back to school, oh Lord, I'm supposed to be a lawyer, not a teacher. But yes, once that occurs, I'm hoping to be able to spend some more time because I want to get the information out as much as I can.
Absolutely. I think it's so important.
Thank you, Wara.
It's as important as getting married, having children.
Come on now.
And having an estate plan. It's almost like a cycle, right?
I agree. I like that circle. Yes. Absolutely.
Circle of life.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yay!
So there you have it, guys. You know, we've had Janelle Williams on Soul Talk. We definitely need to have you back, but we'll be talking. So with that, you know, I want to share with everyone, you know, please definitely visit us on Soul Talk. What's my website? Now you got me all confused. www.soultalkwithwara.com. And, you know, we also want to make sure that, you know, you hit that subscribe button so that you are aware of, you know, an episode that's coming and you get to hear more about some of my knowledge, the knowledge that these guests are bringing, the value that we're adding, right, to your life. One thing I want to talk about is an annual conference that we are scheduling. It's going to include people with great conversations. As always, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit us at soultalkwithwara.com or leave me a message, right? I'd always love to hear from our listeners and our audience. Again, don't forget to continue to live a soulful life. My name is Wara Grant. Until the next episode of Soul Talk, remain soulful.